another episode of Donut Discusses Origins. Because hell, why not? I guess I gotta start this off as normal. For those of you who haven't seen the previous 2 episodes of this will be a part of a playlist that you can go to on my homepage. Basically, Donut Discusses Origins is me talking about things that I might see for happening to Origins, talking about different characters, what might happen to those, and honestly all around just talking about Origins. In my last episode, I discussed what could possibly happen in Naya's final finale for Origins of Olympus Season 3. So if you guys want to go check that out, I'd really appreciate it. And this episode is dedicated all towards Atlas, Lotus's sibling in Origins of Olympus. Let me just point this out now. Spoiler alert for those who haven't watched Atlas's POV for Origins of Olympus, and who honestly haven't watched Origins of Olympus at all. You will get a lot of spoilers from me in this. But I wanted to talk about Atlas due to Brian's sudden leaving of Origins, and basically we don't know, from what my friends have told me, we didn't really get told what was going to happen to Atlas in the finale. Or we saw him in Naya's quote-unquote finale, but we learned that that wasn't the actual finale. We also got told what was Artemis's plot point from MHO and Kaiba's ending, but we didn't really get told much about Atlas's. So in this, I kind of wanted to talk about what I would have hoped, or my hopes for what would have happened to Atlas, the plot/arcs that he could go through if he was in Season 4, which might happen, even as a side character. Hopefully as a side character, because Atlas is quite iconic to me. And honestly, just talking about the character in general. And a little AU or theory that I hope might come true, or we might get some confirmation from if we ever do get a mini finale for Origins of Olympus from Brian's side. So, let's start off with just talking about the character. I love Atlas's character. It hit every single bit of that emo teenager trope perfectly. Most characters that do this I'm annoyed by because it's honestly just such a classic trope. But Brian managed to pull it off with Atlas in a way that was satisfying and honestly pleasing and fun to hear. The constant whatevers and not like I care at all honestly made Atlas the most iconic out of the Bright Poo kids in my opinion. Because Atlas was the only one who had a personality like his in all of Origins of Olympus. There were bookworms like Femi, and smart mouths like Femi, Brian and Impu, where she got that from. And there are people like Lotus who have disabilities, like Impu, and also one with self-doubts, which is a lot of the cast of Origins of Olympus, trust me, there are a lot of insecure characters. But we've never seen any characters in Origins of Olympus quite like Atlas. He stands out amongst the probably over 50 plus characters of Origins of Olympus in all of its seasons. In my opinion, at least. And I absolutely love that about the guy. Also, it's pretty clear how strong he is compared to the other siblings. I think he's probably the strongest one out of all the siblings combined. We have Femi and Lotus and Atlas. And personally, I think Atlas might be the strongest one out of them. He does look more like Brian in the fact that he has wings, though they're dark, with Impu's Shadow Blade related powers. And I think that this might lead a little bit into my theory later on, but we're just gonna pass over that for now. Atlas's red eyes and just the little skull look, while sticking with being more on the Greek side, as even Atlas confirmed that he is more on the Greek side, and honestly, he definitely stands out from the Greek Pantheon as well, being the only Greek Pantheon member, as far as I know, other than Xylo, to wear very darker clothes. And also have a skull on as a belt. I absolutely love that little feature. Makes him even more emo. And as far as I know, he's the only one of the Bright Boot kids that actually has eyeshadow. So good on him for that. I just imagine... This is a cute little headcanon of mine that I'm gonna put in just because I feel like it. But I imagine that Femi actually, helps Atlas with the eyeshadow. Because we heard from Cal, who has similar eyeshadow, that it takes a while to do. It's very hard. So, and with Atlas being the kind of whatever person who doesn't want help, it would be understandable for it not to happen on screen, but if it even was behind the scenes of, like, Femi helping Atlas with the makeup, I would love that idea. We also know that he has a little bit of red eyeshadow, so yeah, I don't think Atlas can do that unless he owns his own eyeshadow pack, which I might just draw thinking about that. But now now talking about the design of the character and a little bit of a headcanon, let's talk about the character's plot and how it influenced Origins of Olympus. Atlas definitely wasn't one of the major factors of Origins of Olympus that made it, well, were one of the main characters. He wasn't allowed to go to any of the Origins of Olympus, or, not Origins of Olympus, Atlantis meetings with his siblings. None of his siblings were allowed to go. He wasn't allowed to go to the Atlantis ball, but I would be curious if he would bring a date with him, if he ever did have one. And then once again, I would also like to bring up the fact of how emo he is. Because that also led to him being a bit more outed compared to the rest of the other siblings. Lotus got their own time, basically feeling like the middle child. And we got a scene of Impu and Femi about, well, another thing. Femi basically helping to learn what can bring Brian back. But we never actually get to see a important scene with Atlas and Impu. Except for the time in the episode that I mentioned in the previous episode of Donut Discusses Origins. Where basically after Mitch rips off Lotus's wing and attempts to kill the kids. This is an episode that definitely gave me a bit of a shake, because Atlas was the only Bright Boot kid who actually managed to wake up from the shock of the pain that Lotus got. And just a little spoiler here, if one kid at the time felt pain, all the other two would feel it as well. So when Lotus got their wing ripped off, all three of the kids felt like their wing had been ripped off. Even Femi, who didn't even have wings. And Atlas actually managed to stay awake for quite a little bit before passing out next to the bed. And he heard Impu and Mitch fighting. And Atlas's first reaction was, like, worry about his siblings, but the second thought that came was helping Impu. We know that Atlas likes to hide his feelings deep down, and barely breaks with any emotion. He usually hides it from what I'm sure of. And the only times he's broken down is, 1, after the events of Mitch's attack. 2, and as far as the second one that I know of, basically after Atlas was kidnapped by Moors and witnessed Nafelli die in front of him, he tells Impu about what happened and then goes inside, and after that, Brian, the son of Aphrodite, Atlas's father, and father of Femi and Lotus, as well, mentions that Atlas was crying. And this is big because, well, Atlas rarely cries. He only cries twice in the series that we're known of, one on screen and one off screen. And this will lead to another important thing for my little theory later. And let's just talk a bit more about the plot of Atlas after that. Atlas doesn't do that much, to be honest, but he does spend time with his siblings, and it's clear that he cares about them deeply. As, like I mentioned, his first concern when waking up after that traumatic scene was his worry about his siblings, making sure that Femi and Lotus were okay, but those two are passed out. And he honestly puts his family first, which I think is really sweet. And the only times we've really seen him break in emotion, in this term joy, was when Stolas, or I think it's Solus? Not Stolas, sorry, I've been watching too much Hello Boss. But when Solus comes over with Scar. And I think this is a cute little thing about Atlas. Atlas apparently loves animals, just like his father Brian. And I think this is cute. And, like, Atlas even jumps off the counter in one scene of that episode, saying about Scar, "It's so fluffy I'm gonna die," which I would love the idea if, like, we know that Impu's stolen things from the human world. Wait, Impu has access to the human world. Oh no, that's a theory all to itself. But Impu hasn't got a Nintendo Switch for the kids, and a couple of other things as well. How he hides his ears and tail, I do not know. If he steals them, I would love to have a side series of Impu just stealing stuff. Anyway. But I just love the random idea that, what if Impu stole a TV and, like, Alice's favorite movie was Despicable Me? That would kind of be cute. But then, but after that, Atlas, like, asked if he could get a mohawk because Solus has a mohawk. And Impu says maybe after the soul separation, which we know he probably would not want that because protective dad. But if season 4 does end up happening and we do get Atlas as a side character, please, oh please, give him a mohawk. Even if it's just a wig, I would love to see Atlas with a mohawk. That might be a prediction. Or a hope. Whatever. Or what I'll say. Whatever. But this is curious to me because Atlas never showed this interest in Impu or Femi or Lotus. But no, I think there's a little bit of a running trend. Atlas was also the only one who was determined to hope that Brian would come back. Femi and Lotus missed Brian, but they didn't cry over his grave. Oh yeah, that's another scene, I forgot, where Atlas breaks emotion. When he goes to visit Brian's grave alone, and brings some flowers there. And honestly, this scene broke my heart, because it perfectly described a parent knowing that you have a parent, but you've never met them. And it's clear that Atlas wants to be a lot like Brian, and is a lot like Brian. Mostly because he kinda is Brian in a way, but yeah, let's forget about that. But I think this fits well with a little plot that I think Atlas might have had. Him wanting to be able to protect his family. Like I said before, it's obvious that he deeply cares for his family, and would do anything for them. And I think that this plays into the fact of why he's so interested in Brian and so interested in Solus. Not Solus. He wants to become a warrior so he can protect his family. Solus is currently the best fighter in the Egyptian underworld, and Impu, and even before then, Atlas thought Solus was cool, even calling him Uncle Solus. And I think that's just sweet. But the idea of Atlas wanting to protect his family and not being able to is honestly just a lot of guilt on a single 15-year-old's shoulder. I honestly would have really liked it if we had seen more of Atlas breaking emotion. And, oh my god, I keep on forgetting. Memories are coming to my head as I'm working on this. There is no script. But there was one episode where we got to see a bit more of a softer side of Atlas. And it wasn't opening up to the siblings, wasn't opening up to Impu, wasn't opening up to Solus. Nope. It was opening up to Brian. And in the fact that Atlas really loved him and really cared about him. And this was honestly just such a sweet scene because Atlas had never really had one-on-one time with his own dad that had come back from the dead. And, oh my god, another crying scene. Atlas cries only a couple of times, but this is another scene I remember. When Brian came back in the episode where he did, there was this cute little moment where, like, Femi and Lotus are happy about when, basically, Brian says that he doesn't know the kids completely that well because he just came back from the dead and all, but he already loves each and every one of them. And this single word causes, like, Femi and Lotus to say, I love you too to Brian, but then Atlas saying, I love you too, trying to fight back tears, and then eventually crying a little bit. And Impu even mentions, like, not even Impu, Femi even mentions, this is rare because he usually doesn't show that much emotion. First off, damn Femi, that's kinda cold. Second of all, she's right. He usually doesn't show that much emotion, and the part that Femi and Lotus understand that is kind of a bit of a funny joke to think about. But what could this mean? Other than, well, he can't be completely happy or pull up the fake emo persona all the time. And this leads into a little headcanon of mine that though Atlas is a lot like Brian, maybe he's a bit like Impu in a way too. And basically, for what I imagine, Atlas might have a bit of anxiety. I have anxiety myself, and it sucks. But imagining Atlas having it too. Having the certain time where they can't keep their emotions in forever. I've had that same experience too, where I can't really hold in my emotions completely forever, and eventually have to let them out. Either through happiness or through sadness or anger. And this would fit well with Atlas too. And why he is, well, secluding most of the time, but on some rare occasions manages to open up. And what I love is at the end of the series, we see him genuinely happy. Well, and this is where it goes into theory time. If I missed anything that, well, I'm not gonna talk too much more about Alice's plot because, heck, we've already covered a lot of it, and I honestly don't know how long this video is already. Might be the longest one so far. Definitely gonna be the longest one so far. But it's time to go about theory time. Because we all love them juicy theories, don't we? And this is not a summoning for Luna. As much as I would love Luna to do a bit of a theory on Atlas and shadow powers, maybe. I mentioned Atlas maybe having powers in the previous episode of Donut Discusses Origins. But in this episode, I'm just gonna gush about it because I cannot help it. I have to. I said I 3 times. I am now Riku. But this is going into theory and headcanon territory, so this is the part where you may agree with me, disagree with me, and so on and so forth. And the first theory that I'd like to get out of there, or like little headcanon, is that Atlas may be vegan? I don't know. We know how closely, related he is to Brian more than Impu, but I personally don't believe that Atlas is gonna be a vegan. If anything, I think it'd be more fitting if Phoebe was the vegan out of the 3 Braipu kids. Or Lotus. Lotus could fit too. But I personally think Atlas is more on the Jackal side of things, with a little headcanon that Neodoodles on Twitter came up with, or someone came up with. Neodoodles did art for it, and I'm not going to show the art here because I personally think you should go check it out yourself and go check out Neodoodles yourself. I think it's pretty easy to find them if you search up Origins animations. But someone suggested the headcanon that Atlas may not look entirely like Impu, but Atlas has jackal fangs that he has, and will sometimes growl, whimper, or whine whenever he's upset. I honestly love this headcanon. Even if it isn't shown in the series, I definitely would like to see this if we do get a Season 4 of Origins of Olympus. I'd love to see Atlas, well, having a bit more improv features. Maybe not with looks, but maybe in the way that he eats, maybe not being vegan, but maybe growling at, like, his... Imagining Atlas growling at Moors would be amazing and kind of cute. Atlas can growl at anybody and get away with it. It would also kind of fit in with the protector type vibe that I'm getting from Atlas. Because we've already discussed a little bit earlier that, well, Atlas definitely seems like the kind of person that would want to protect his family and keep him safe. And let's talk about another thing. Like I mentioned earlier, there was going to be some theory diving. And I mentioned this theory a couple of times to my friends on Discord, but I wanted to put it in this video because I'm honestly dedicated to this theory. That Atlas, though looking more like Brian, and maybe having the fangs, probably not, actually has shadow powers like Impu. We've seen Femi, who has jackal ears and tail, have healing powers instead of shadow powers like Brian. So it would make sense if Femi has Brian powers, the one that doesn't have jackal ears would have shadow powers, right? And I know that might be a little bit of a dumb thing, but I also have a little bit of proof of why I think that Atlas has shadow powers. And it all has to do with a certain person's thumbnails. Kiwi's. Kiwi is... let me just gush about their art for a second. I love Kiwi's art to bits. It's always pure eye candy whenever I look at it. It's really adorable sometimes. It's really epic. I don't know. Whatever Kiwi wants to be, it is that. And I absolutely love that about Kiwi's style. The semi-realism and how well they draw the characters is honestly amazing. And there are two thumbnails that honestly stuck out for me. As I said before, there are two bad events that have happened to Atlas. Unlike all the bad stuff happening to the other kids, Atlas only has two. Number one, being along with the other Brightpoo siblings, getting attacked by Mitch. And number two, getting kidnapped by Moors, the god of fate. Honestly, I'd be terrified too if fate kidnapped me. And I think that this is definitely important to point out. The two episodes where bad stuff has happened to Atlas, and one thing stays in common. Glowing red eyes. First this is basically the second thumbnail that I was talking about, Birth to Death of a God in Origins of Olympus. And in this thumbnail, if you look at it very closely, you can see that Atlas's eyes are glowing. And this is a little trait that goes on in only two thumbnails. This one, and then the episode where Mitch attacks the Brightpoo kids, where you can clearly see Atlas's eyes are glowing. This might just be for effect, but personally, I like little details, and I notice them pretty easily due to my ADHD and autism. Which also explains my stuttering and why I keep on saying Solus is Stolus. The names are too similar. But I wanted to point this out because there's another character that has glowing eyes. But not really all the time. But it only when certain things happen. And that is Impu. In Season 2, after Impu loses his arm and fights Magnus, his eye color changes to from purple, I believe his regular eye color was. Or, yeah, I think it was purple. If it was red, well, yeah, it was purple. He grows a shadow arm and his eyes turn red. And they glow a little bit from what we've seen from the animatic scenes. And this is very important as well, because Impu's shadow arm has only come out on certain occasions. In Season 3, the only two that I know of so far are when Mitch threatened to kill the kids. And after Mitch left, his shadow arm came out, along with a little bit of eye effects, which I might want to discuss about in another video. And the other time this happens in Season 3, as far as I know of, when Impu's fighting Mitch. Both times, he felt threatened, or he felt like his family was in danger, or he felt like he himself was in danger. This also happened in Season 2, when Impu was fighting Bookness, when the Book of Death was possessing Magnus. And honestly, I think it's not a coincidence that both times in thumbnails that we see Atlas feel threatened or terrified or scared, it just happens to be the thumbnails where his eyes are glowing red. I would love to see what would happen if Atlas actually did have shadow powers. And now it's time for what I hoped his ending would have been, and what I kind of predict could be it. And, well, what I expect if we do see Atlas in Origins of Olympus Season 4, if that does happen. And if Atlas isn't there, what might be the explanation or excuse used? Well, going back to this picture, I think the first easy prediction or hope that I have for Atlas's ending, or what it could have been, like I mentioned earlier, Impu and Atlas haven't had any heart-to-heart scenes. The only one was Atlas basically being rude to Impu and not accepting Impu's apology about keeping the truth from him. And I would love to have a heartfelt scene of Atlas and Impu connecting with each other over what has happened, and Atlas finally being able to open up to Impu instead of the rest of the family. Yes, I still want him to open up to the rest of the family, but the fact that he hasn't opened up to Impu specifically, or any of the other characters, it's definitely saddening. Considering that Impu is probably the best dad in the Origins of Olympus, the fact that he couldn't reconnect with his own son definitely could be something that I wished would have happened. Heck, I even wished it happened from the moment I heard that the finale was coming up. I really wanted to see a scene where Atlas and Impu reconnected with each other and apologized to each other for how they acted. Now talking a bit about some other things. Kaiba, well, not Kaiba, but related to Kaiba, Atlas's friendship with Kaiba. I was curious to see where that would go. And it was nice to see the two characters become friends. Well, what could possibly happen I have a few ideas for why Atlas might not be in Origins of Olympus Season 4. The first one is either basically being in the Egyptian underworld, either training with Magnus, or possibly with Solus. I think this would be really nice to hear, or a good excuse to get Atlas out of the picture. Because Atlas would totally be the kind of person to train with Magnus or Solus, and it would totally fit his character. Another excuse I'm imagining might be used is Atlas is searching for Kaiba. We know from Brian in his video or stream talking about the rest of his characters' endings that Kaiba eventually, after feeling like he doesn't belong there, teleports his whole kingdom away. And we also got a sneak peek hinting to maybe a side story or side series with Kaiba in it, which I'd love. And I honestly expect it if Atlas went with a few of our characters and went on a hunt to try and find Kaiba. I would actually be happy to hear that Atlas is trying to, actually keep one of his friends instead of his friend running away. But anyway, back to things I also hoped for Atlas. I would have also liked to really see a bit more guilt from Atlas. We knew he clearly felt bad about not being able to move in time and basically stopping Lotus from losing their wing, believing that it should have been him instead. I would have loved to see how far this would have gone, and maybe how much guilt Atlas would have felt. Maybe that could be another excuse that why he might not be in another season of Origins of Olympus. That he felt so much guilt that he ran away. But even then, if we get a side cameo from Atlas, I would be happy. And I think that there's another thing I definitely want to talk about. And that is Atlas connecting with Nafelli. The two talked in the same episode that I mentioned, Birth to Death of a God. And in that same episode, Mars kills Nafelli right in front of Atlas, basically. Karina has to hold Atlas back. And I think this also helps with the fact that he feels guilt over not being able to stop things in time. Lotus's wing, and now Nafelli's death. I imagine that, I think Nafelli told Atlas about her relationship with Brian and how they used to be good friends. So maybe Atlas felt bad, or yeah, he definitely felt bad about witnessing someone's neck being snapped right in front of him. Thanks for that, Moore's childhood trauma commence, making him even more emo than he already is. And honestly, I would really like to see a scene, hopefully if we do get a finale from Atlas's POV, that maybe Nafelli apologizes to Atlas, or Atlas apologizes to Nafelli for not being able to save her in time. And now she has to work as a deliverer of death, basically. Or a messenger of death. I imagine that this would be actually a really sweet scene, and maybe this could be another thing that Atlas opens up to Impu about if they do talk. But if I do have any more thoughts on Atlas, I will gladly make another video, but for the time being, I think that's about it. I don't have that much else to talk about Atlas. So, I guess that's it for this video. God, this was long and terribly put together. I'm sorry. But the next character I will be talking about is Femi. So if you guys want to see that, please maybe leave a like. But it's up to you if you do want to subscribe or not. I don't tell anybody to subscribe to my channel. It's up to them. Unlike most YouTubers who I know basically say like click the subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't need to do that for me. I don't mind. I'm just doing this as a little hobby to keep me entertained. And get me out of some rough places. So, I'd like to wrap things off of there. If you guys have any ideas for things I could talk about, possibly, please leave them in the description below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think Atlas could have become, or what could have happened to Atlas. And possibly some more theories that I could talk about in mini episodes of this. So, I guess that's it, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys!